Hello, everybody. Welcome to our regular Friday get together, our webinar, our YouTube presentation, and podcast all rolled into one. It's good to be back with you again. And it's good to be with you on September 11th and to be here to commemorate the loss of people who are dear to so many of us. To commemorate as well the firefighters who gave so much on 9/11, gave their lives, gave their total effort and their lives to save people in the Twin Towers, and to have some time to appreciate that kind of incredible bravery and generosity. And I'm very glad to have on this program my special guests. Well, all my guests are special, but particularly for this day, Margaret Gavian, who's special to me because we've known each other and worked closely together now for 20 years. So, Margaret, welcome. And we're going to be together and we're going to talk about the issues that are confronting now, 19 years after 9/11, that are confronting firefighters in Minnesota, where Margaret lives and works, and all over the country. And we're also going to return to address some of the questions that you've raised about how to deal with the ongoing pandemic and how to deal with the crisis that continues to unfold all over the country for us as a nation, as well as for us individually. Right now, before I do a kind of more formal introduction of Margaret, we're going to sit for a couple minutes and breathe together. So remember, this is a concentrative meditation, and we're going to focus on our breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth with our bellies soft and relaxed. So concentrating on the breath, coming in through the nose and out through the mouth, on the word soft, as we breathe in, as a reminder, and belly as we breathe out, reminding us to relax and let our belly soften. And on the feeling of that relaxation and softening in our bellies, that relaxation that then moves to all parts of our body. So close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, and let's breathe together. Focusing on the breath, on the word soft as you breathe in, belly as you breathe out, and then on the feeling of our bellies being soft and relaxed. And feeling your whole body relax a little more with each exhalation. If thoughts come, let them come, let them go. Gently bring your mind back to soft belly. And perhaps as we're breathing now, honoring those who lost their lives on 9/11 and the family members and friends who experienced so much grief, feeling our connection, our kinship with them. Okay, open your eyes. Let's open our eyes and let our attention come back in the room. I don't know about you, Margaret, but as I was breathing, I was feeling sadness, but I was also feeling great joy. And I was thinking of all those extraordinary moments with the firefighters when we were laughing together, when we go from tears to laughter and just these incredible experiences.
Yeah.
So everybody, Margaret Gavian is a clinical psychologist in Minnesota. She's the medical director of the Minnesota Fire Initiative, and she is the founder and executive director of PAR 360, an organization that works with firefighters and their families that she'll tell us about in a few moments. She has also worked at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine for a number of years, beginning in 2000, and subsequently was the lead psychologist at North Memorial Hospital in Minneapolis, where she brought the Center for Mind-Body Medicine's program to an extraordinary day hospital program, which really kind of enlarged the medical model in significant and remarkable ways and brought help and healing to so many people. So, Margaret, it's great to have you here. Great to be back with you. I miss you. I'm always so happy to see you.
I know. I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
So tell our viewers, our listeners, a little bit about who you are and how you came to be at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine and how that's affected the work that you did with firefighters and continue to do.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I think how I came to the Center for Mind-Body Medicine is I was looking for, back when I was beginning my career, and I had become very disheartened in what was happening therapeutically in the therapies I was learning, in the hospital systems I was watching. And I really felt very disenchanted with what people were calling healing. And I knew that there had to be a better way. I knew from my own personal experience of when I managed my stress, my physical symptoms started to go away. And I was determined to learn more. And that's how I learned about you and your work. And then I was even more determined that I needed to be right in the thick of it with you. And that's how I came to the Center for Mind-Body Medicine 20 plus years ago.
And so what was it like for you coming here? And I'm remembering, as we're talking, I'm remembering the time with the firefighters. I'm also remembering us crossing over at the Erez crossing from Israel into Gaza and being together there. So give people a little feeling for what it was like for you as a young person at the beginning of your career coming here and why it's become so important to you.
Well, you and I mean, I began this work in war zones with you, or in post-conflict zones in Kosovo, in Israel, in Gaza, and then after the firefighters in New York after 9/11. So it was exciting. It was also tremendously heartbreaking to sit and witness and hear the stories of so much pain, but also very inspiring to see that there were skills, there were things that could be done in some of the most horrific situations with people that had seen and done and been a part of some of the most horrific scenarios that really changed their lives, that really had the power to give people control over their own physiology, over how they were feeling, over how they were managing their daily lives. And that became really inspiring for me. And also something that not always is talked about, really seeing some of the beauty and good that can come out of tragedy. So I got really interested in that concept, which led me to my doctoral program where I studied more about post-traumatic growth. But the work with the firefighters in particular, to see the families that had been so greatly affected by the events of 9/11, to see the children who were struggling and anxious, to hear the stories of the spouses who had never talked to their loved one, of their firefighters that actually made it home that day and they had never spoken of the events, and to see the stress and how that was starting to manifest in everyone's lives, not only in the firefighters that survived, that were riddled with guilt and a deep sense of responsibility about what had happened to their brothers and sisters. So that was really where I felt deeply called to do more of this trauma work and healing work. And it all started with you.
What was it about firefighters in particular that touched you so much, and that now this has become central to all the work that you're doing?
It really has. Firefighters are some of the most generous, funny as all get out group. They are selfless. So they are, and it's not only just walking into burning buildings. I feel so inspired by their sense of community service. My children are grandchildren of a firefighter. My father was a veteran. I myself even trained as a volunteer firefighter and EMT in Arlington back in the day before I went and finished my doctorate. And firefighters really, they're such a fun and deeply generous bunch that don't think twice about putting themselves in the line of danger, and more than just in burning buildings, and they're on the line in the everyday tragedies that we call in our hardest moments. That's who shows up when our dad is fallen over in the middle of the floor, when his heart has stopped, when we're in a car accident on the road. They're who shows up, and they just jump right in without a second thought. So that's been deeply inspiring.
Well, it sounds like, and I'm pretty sure it does, strike a sympathetic chord in you about who you are.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, in some ways, I feel very connected. I like to be in the thick of things. I like, as a trauma psychologist, as someone who's, my background's in PTSD and working with veterans and other groups of people that have experienced a lot of tragedy. I like to be in the thick of things. I like to be where the action is. It's why I loved my work when you and I were traveling overseas and with the firefighters in New York. And that is still what speaks to me now. Yeah.
Me too. I'm remembering sitting around with Kevin Guy, who was a New York City Fire Department lieutenant. We were sitting around, we'd gotten to know each other pretty well. And he said to me, "Hey, Jim, I get it. You're just like us." Yeah. And I said, "Well, Kev, that's a great compliment, but what do you mean?" He said, "Well," he said, you you like to help people, and you like to be where the action is,
Yeah,
and I
exactly.
think you're just like that too, Margaret.
Yeah,
It's a
I
kind
am.
of it's just it's a way of living and a way of being that apparently suits both of us. Do you want to say anything more about the work with firefighters that was you're just saying some things were very moving to you. How did you see that mind body approaches could be helpful back in 2002 when we were doing the work originally with firefighters? What could you see as the changes that were coming about?
So, firefighters as a bunch are pretty tight-lipped. They are selfless to a fault, and that sometimes works against them in their own health and healing. So, and that's generally, but in after 9/11, what we were seeing with the firefighters that we worked with then and their families is disconnection and not speaking of some of the things that they felt in their hearts, that they had seen, that they had been thinking about, the isolation and the loneliness that they had started to pull back, and they had never spoken of what had been on their minds after the events of 9/11. It had been too hard. It had been too traumatic. They didn't really know what to say. They were very, and I remember Kevin in particular, pretty edgy bunch and pretty tight-lipped. So it's not a group that shares emotions easily. Or opens up very easily, especially to outsiders like we were. And so through that work, what we began to see was a softening, was tears, was grief in an environment that they hadn't had that chance to listen to one another before, to communicate with each other and their families before, and for husbands and wives to talk to each other again, to open the lines of communication, for there to finally, and with that softening and with that group connection and support, there started to emerge moments of joy, and real joy, not just the laugh it off kind of humor that sometimes firefighters are pretty well known for. But children who had been sitting back because they weren't sure why dad was so edgy were really having a chance to let that stress that they were carrying and didn't have the words for go. So it was really a beautiful example of a tragedy that befell on a community, and how a community could come together and heal together in community with one another.
Thank you. As you're speaking, but I want to sort of I'm reminded and want to remind everyone that this is what our work is doing everywhere, and that so many of us firefighters are kind of a archetype of the strong and silent when they're not joking around, but not talking about emotions very much. But our whole country, to some degree, is like that. And that's been part of the problem, is people haven't really been able to get in touch with what they're feeling, particularly during this pandemic. And that there is a kind of shutdown and everybody is on edge. And it's not so easy for so many people to be able to take a few deep breaths. I'm taking one right now. And then to be able to feel comfortable sharing. So in a sense, the work with firefighters that we did, at least for me and perhaps for you as well, helped me see what's possible. For firefighters for sure, but for all of us. And that this need of coming together and the need of creating a safe place where we can share as well as learn the techniques seems so important. That's coming to mind as we're talking. So as we're talking about firefighters, I think you have really important things to share about firefighters and their families. But for those who are listening or watching us, please, we're not so different. Some of the issues that are confounding to firefighters and their families, they're very much issues that we're all facing. And the firefighters, because they're dealing with so much trauma all the time, or in a sense, they're they're the scouts in this world of chaos and danger and fear. And the solutions that we, and now that Margaret is particularly working on in Minnesota, are solutions not just for firefighters, but for all of us. I'd like to move ahead and ask you a little bit about what you're doing with the Minnesota Fire Initiative, and then with the organization that you started, PAR 360. So maybe you can, first of all, what is PAR 360? What does it stand for, and what are you hoping to do now in Minnesota? How did you get to Minnesota, and what are you hoping to do? Because now you're becoming so much a part of the fabric of life in Minnesota.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I came to Minnesota through the University of Minnesota, where I did my graduate work. And I came here knowing that there was a community of mind-body practitioners here. Several of our faculty members were here, as well as I knew that there were some trauma organizations already doing work here, and some important research that was also happening at the university. So that's how I landed in Minnesota. My work with firefighters began when this group of fire chiefs who were very concerned about what was happening within the fire service, Minnesota fire chiefs. There are some huge health disparities going on within the fire service. And the one that concerns me the most is the extremely high rates of suicide. So 50% of firefighters think about killing themselves, and nobody's talking about it.
I want everybody to just pause a moment and think about that. 50%. They were asked the question in a survey. How did you get that information, and what does it say to you?
Yeah, that research is coming out of some studies that are being discussed by the International Association of Firefighting. Those are that's national data. And I can't tell you how many times I talk about that statistic, and it floors me every time. I feel tearful talking about it now, because it's the silent killer. Not only is suicide killing more people, more firefighters than line of duty deaths, for example, being trapped in a burning building and not being able to escape. If for those people that it's not killing, people are suffering silently with things like increased rates of substance use and alcohol use disorders, increased rates of anxiety, depression, lots of family conflict for when someone who is in an occupation of great stress, and even for those volunteer firefighters who have the regular jobs on the side and just do this out of their own free time. It's just it's ravishing their family lives, their personal lives, their ability to care for themselves, and overall just contributing to a lot of suffering that's unnecessary, that no one says until usually it's gone on for years and decades, and the problems have really piled up in a way, often resulting, unfortunately, in suicide.
Why do you think, and it's more than think because you've looked into this quite a bit, why are so many firefighters thinking about killing themselves?
They feel alone. The firefighters I talk to every day feel like they can't say anything. The culture of the fire service is one of just, pull yourself up from the bootstraps, get back out there on the rig. This is just our job, and just buck up and get out there. This is what we do. We don't need to talk about it. If we've, seen or held a child as they're dying while the mother is screaming, right here, if we're cleaning up horrific car accidents and body parts, or on the scene where someone has killed themselves, some of the images that these firefighters can't shake, right, or eventually creep in. And there's not a space or a place or a culture in which talking about that feels safe or acceptable. They're very strong. Firefighters are extremely courageous, extremely strong, and actually extremely resilient. And many feel that if they are feeling affected by what they're seeing, sometimes the darkest parts of humanity is what they're seeing every day, that they must be broken, because they used to be fine. They used to be able to do it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 years before. And now all of a sudden it's starting to affect them. They don't feel like they can say anything about that because they don't want to put their job at risk. They don't want to look weak with their other brothers and sisters who rely on them in emergency situations. And also they feel like, well, I should be able to handle it. This is my job. So they're not quite accustomed to caring for themselves. Self-care is way down on the list of priorities, if it's even makes the list at all.
So how are you working because with the departments, because clearly this is not just I want to emphasize this is not just an individual issue or problem. This is a culture of the firefighters and perhaps the larger culture in which firefighters are embedded, this culture in the United States. That how do you help them deal with these situations, which in themselves are very distressing, as you described them, and disturbing? And I've heard the same thing from firefighters with whom I've talked. How do you help to them on an individual level, on a systemic and cultural level? What are you trying to implement in Minnesota?
On a systemic and cultural level, this is really the responsibility of departments and city administrators to care for our firefighters and other first responders who are out there serving. And so what I'm doing with the PAR 360 program is offering training, resilience training and consultation to department leaders, so fire chiefs, as well as training within their department for their families, their spouses, on giving spouses a chance to connect and discuss what they're seeing in their partners. So offering these services of resilience skills, mind-body skills, to keep people protected from the hazards of the job, as well as give them resources for if they are feeling off. That's what I hear. Usually people aren't saying, hello, I have PTSD. They're saying, I'm not sure what's wrong with me. I kind of feel numb. I don't really know what's going on. But my wife tells me that I'm being a jerk. So learning individually that they're not broken, that it's a physiological effect of chronic stress and trauma, and that there are ways to control and to help manage those symptoms in a way that they can care for themselves rather than feel like, well, I picked this career, so I'm just stuck here. So that there's that work individually, as well as systemically changing things like policies and procedures around how the firefighters in a particular crew or shift, when they come back from a very disturbing incident, how they are cared for. Training the chiefs and chief officers in those departments about how to handle when you've got a firefighter who may be creating some conflict at work, but actually that conflict or that interpersonal difficulty is a symptom of stress, is a symptom of PTSD, and how to work in a kind and compassionate way to help keep them healthy and give them a place where they can go if they want extra help, and also share with each other and learn skills to keep them protected.
I wanted to ask you about that. When you implement it, what's the role, one of the sort of strengths of the Center for Mind Body Medicine work, are the small groups that we create where people can share what's going on with them as they feel comfortable. And I'm wondering how that's working with firefighters and what role it plays.
Yeah. So the Center for Mind Body Medicine's work is central to who I am. So it's central to everything I do and every way I'm even thinking about creating a healthy community. And firefighters are a challenging bunch in that they don't really want to talk in front of other people about what's really happening underneath the surface that everyone, most people are relating to, but don't want to voice. So we're really piloting different ways of going about that, working closely with some chiefs and talking about these being resilience skills, not you're broken and go sit in the group to talk about your problem skills. So that's really couching it as skills and an environment in which you can use to be the firefighter you want to be the father or the mother or the parent you want to be. And it's a challenge because people don't want to share.
And what about the group? How does this relates to the first question that we've been asked, but we're moving into it already. What about the small group? How have you been able to use that with firefighters? Because there's sort of a paradox here. I've spent some time in firehouses, and it looks like everybody is very tightly connected with each other.
Yes.
But you're saying they're tightly connected in certain ways, but not sharing the emotions. So how do you create a situation? What's the invitation to them, and how do they respond to the invitation to be part of a group and to share?
The invitation is more about helping each other, helping other people, than it is about learn how to take care of yourself. That's usually not a priority. So the invitation is learn some skills to help your relationship or to help your other fellow firefighters so you can notice when people are off or when they may need a little bit of care or attention. So it's always the focus is on the other, having them care for other people, which they're so very good at.
And so they're willing to come into a group to learn the skills to do that.
Sometimes. If I'm lucky. Yes.
What makes who's willing and who's not willing? What are the challenges that you face with that?
I've worked in some departments that have made groups mandatory because they're so concerned about the high rates of mental health disorders. And that's never quite an effective strategy. But even in those groups that I've done that have been kind of strongly encouraged by their leaders, even those have been quite amazing in what has come out of them. For example, it's them sitting in around the chairs and their tables with their arms crossed, and their body language is all kind of get me the heck out of here. But over time, watching and starting to hear the stories of, I was practicing that breathing voodoo stuff, and my daughters are saying that Daddy's not angry anymore, so thank you. Or I was in this situation with my spouse and we were in this really big argument, but I just started practicing soft belly and I didn't react in the way I used to, right? So they start to see with just, a little bit of a experience that actually what's happening has really significant effects, especially in their family lives, and that gets their attention.
I want to emphasize a point that you're making is that you're inviting people into the groups and they're coming for their reasons, not necessarily for the reason you or I might have in mind. I think it's really important for those who are watching us that it's not always, as you pointed out, not always somebody saying, I'm coming for myself, I want to feel better, that people often come. And firefighters are a beautiful example. They want to come because of their relations with other people. And that's what's bringing them there, to be able to help. We saw the same thing, and we continue to see the same thing in Gaza. It's not about me. Forget about me. I'm 30 years old. My life is over. I'm concerned about my children. Come, that's why I'll do it. So I really appreciate that. And I think it's important for people who are therapists who are watching us to understand that we need to really, as the phrase goes, we need to be people where they are and not necessarily where we think they should be. And that then miracles can happen if you kind of give up that professional authority that says this is the way it's supposed to be. And if you say, let me serve you. Let me do what's going to make a difference for you.
Yeah. And in the beginning of my work, Jim, those the first groups of firefighters that I worked with, they really handed that to me pretty straight in a kind of no BS way. Firefighters are kind of, straight shooters. They don't BS, and they like to call you out, and they respect when you call them out. But I learned that lesson quickly when I began. And I think, and what I see in a lot of other therapists or providers is like, oh, there's this, there's so much trauma and it's kind of sensationalized. And the firefighters I speak to are like, yeah, that is part of my life. But actually that's not always what's bugging me. It's that I have a plate full of community obligations, work stress that is not related to tragedy on a scene, and other types of stressors, relationships that they actually cared about. And it wasn't always what we sometimes as healthcare providers get kind of excited about as like the big traumas, right? It wasn't that. And they were like, stop talking about that. We don't care. We're fine. Like, I can deal with that. It's the other stuff that's really got me up at night, right? So your point is well made. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I want just a couple more questions, and then I want to move into other people's questions. First of all, what is PAR 360? What does that,
Sure.
What does that mean? What does that?
So this is fire lingo. In incident command, when we're incident command on a fire scene or on the fire ground, when there is a commander sending groups of firefighters into a building, in PAR is personal accountability and responsibility. So you want to know where your people are in the building and have they come out. So do you have PAR, right? They have a system for this. And 360 is kind of doing the full look around. What's going on here? So this name was created, and everything I do is created alongside with firefighter input to help me understand better and the culture and deliver better services. So PAR 360 is about taking responsibility for myself and taking a full look at my own life and looking around at how am I doing? Do I have PAR? Am I safe? Am I okay? Not only is my physical health accounted for, but what about my emotional health and my mental well-being? How am I doing in my family life, in my work life, in my community, with myself? So that's where PAR 360 was born out of.
It sounds like, from what you're saying, since some of your work is with fire chiefs and with whole departments, that they're responding to that approach, that has a resonance for them.
They are. So often I get calls from chiefs who don't know what to do. They know there are problems brewing within their department, or I get a call after there has been a suicide or a tragedy involving one of their firefighters, and they don't know what to do. And so they want to offer some sort of help, but they need some guidance on how to do that. And so that's why I do what I do.
Great. One other thing that's come up, in addition to the suicidal feelings and the very high levels of suicide and depression, I was talking with the battalion chief in Indianapolis, and one of the things he said to me is, what's really getting to me is how much cancer there is on firefighters. How much, and he says, it's the cancer and also all these chronic illnesses, and these guys and women are developing it very young. Do you want to say something about that as well?
Yes. So it's what's killing firefighters is cancer, heart disease, and emotional trauma. So those are the health disparities within the fire service, and the organization I also work with, Minnesota Fire Initiative. Those group of chiefs came together several years ago to really address that health disparity. And what we know is they're not siloed medical situations, right? We know that the whole body acts in concert with the nervous system, is related to what happens in the rest of our body, and the effects of chronic and prolonged stress reduce immunity to things like reduce our ability to fight off illnesses like cancer or pain or infections. It's not happening just because firefighters might be breathing in higher rates of carcinogens than the rest of us. It's also happening because they're in high stress environments that are affecting the whole body. And mental health is just one piece of that. That's just a symptom of a body out of balance. Everybody's body will start to give at some point when we're under stress, right? And everybody's give may look a little different. It may look like a medical illness, like a cancer or a diabetes for one person, and it may look like insomnia and anxiety for another person, but all just symptoms of a physiological body out of whack and needing some care and relaxation.
Thank you. No, I think it's a really important point that this is,
yeah,
that we are whole people, and it comes out, each of us is different biochemically, psychologically. So this profound stress will manifest in different ways. Mm-hmm. This is related to some of the questions we have later on. Have you noticed changes in the last 6 months with the COVID-19 pandemic? Changes for firefighters? What's going on? I'm wondering about that myself. How has it affected them?
I think it has added an extra layer of complication and stress to already stressful jobs. So while some of us may have thought that, oh, well, now they must be freaked out about COVID, actually, the firefighters I talked to were thinking, I'm not actually scared or nervous about that. I'm kind of out there on the front lines anyway, putting myself in harm's way all the time. That's not the big deal. But what did happen with a lot of the COVID within departments, which was deeply disturbing to me, was that firefighters who have community around the kitchen table, who sit around between calls and connect and talk and watch a movie, they were told to separate. So you come back from a call and you just go into your private room and you rest and you don't interact with the rest of your team members. That was really disturbing to me. So they were feeling more disconnected from one another, and as well as having a lot of extra safety precautions in place out in the community that was making it hard for them to do the work in the way they wanted to and the way they've been trained to. Firefighters run, I think most people don't always think of how many medical calls firefighters are running. So they're running many more medical calls than actually walking into burning buildings. So it was creating more separation and another added stressor. Firefighters were coming home from their shift and being quarantined away from their families. So because they were out there so exposed in the community, families were saying, okay, now you just kind of go you're going to sleep in the basement and the children, we're not interacting with you. So that was deeply disturbing. I think some of that has dialed down more recently, but it was more stress and more disconnection.
And what kinds of responses are you helping departments create to deal with this increased isolation and separation?
I advocate as much as possible to the fire leaders I speak to about creating community, and I understand to keep safe from COVID and to take the necessary precautions, but also to leaders need to come out of their offices, talk to their firefighters, really work very on a daily basis of talking and creating more community in the everyday over a cup of coffee kind of way, as well as some of the more systematic or infrastructure kind of ways.
No, I really appreciate that. And I think, again, for those of you who are watching us, that the lessons that Margaret's talking about from firefighters, these should be the same lessons for our families and our places of work. That I'm finding that at the center, that we need more community. We need
Yeah.
more during this time of separation. We have to make a more intentional effort to bring staff together, for us to bring our faculty together. And I think this is true of any place of any sort of community organization or any business. Everybody needs to understand that the need for community, which is built into human biology, that it is heightened during this time of enforced separation.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get to some of the questions that have been asked from people who knew we were going to be talking. We've already discussed some of the issues related to engaging firefighters and other first responders who may not be accustomed to sharing their feelings. And I think you've spoken very wisely about engaging them on the issues that are important to them, whether they're physical, whether they're family issues, whether they're issues related to their work in the community. I want to focus on a second question that's come up. Can you speak to the special needs of the children of firefighters?
Well, now I don't work with children, so I will qualify that. But what I know and what I hear about every day is either I'll get calls from spouses, or the firefighters themselves will be sharing about how the stress is affecting their ability to be present and to be the parent that they want to be. That they'll come home from a shift or from a call and be angry and edgy and irritated with their children over very small things, to the point where the children feel like they are walking on eggshells and don't really want to go around them anymore. And that's heartbreaking. What we know about historical trauma, and trauma is passed down generationally. And so this has significant effects on children in terms of their own ability to regulate themselves, in terms of their, and you can probably speak more to this, Jim, their epigenetics, what illnesses will maybe be turned on for the child of a parent who's having high stress in their own personal lives. So the effects are great. There are also a lot of families that end up splitting and divorcing as a result of the long-term effects of dealing with trauma, of post-traumatic stress. It's very hard to have close relationships when that trauma and the PTSD isn't addressed adequately. And so that has generations of effects on the children of firefighters and even their children moving forward.
How are you helping the firefighters and their spouses or partners deal with this, to help so that this stress is not transmitted
Mm-hmm.
to the children?
So we're just getting going with that and developing some family workshops and trainings to give, first of all, spouses a chance to share. I remember one family training I was giving, I was invited to come do kind of just a little hour spiel on mental health and what's facing firefighters. And once the doors closed, and it was just spouses and family members, no firefighters in the room, I didn't leave that room for 3.5 hours. They were desperate to share, desperate to learn, desperate for community. And so we're working now with the PAR 360 program to develop regular opportunities for spouses to connect and to give them a place to share what it's like to be married to a firefighter, which is actually quite stressful. And
Say a little more about that. Why is it stressful to be married to a firefighter?
Well, you have somebody who's coming home from work or from being on call, and they might have seen some of the worst things out there. They might have had to clean up body parts. They might have had to tell someone that their loved one had passed away. And you have a firefighter walking in the door, holding all of that, wanting to desperately protect their family from the things that they've had to do or see that day. And it starts creating distance, not out of malice or, poor intentions, but the spouse doesn't know, should I ask? Should I not ask? Should I say something? Oh, he doesn't look like he wants to talk about it, so I'll just let him be. The firefighter comes in, maybe they've gotten off shift and now they're walking in the door and they haven't been home for a few days. And there's all these honey-do lists that have kind of piled up, and they're walking in kind of exhausted, traumatized often, and just sort of expected to transition back into family life without taking care of themselves. So it can create conflict within relationships in that way. Also, just because some of the symptoms of a system that's under extreme stress is irritability and edginess, right? And so that's going to translate into their personal relationships.
No, I really appreciate it. It's a very clear picture. And I just want to emphasize that working with the parents, both with firefighters and their spouses or partners, is probably the crucial element in being helpful to the children. Mm-hmm. I think there's a tendency in the United States, if a child is manifesting symptoms, let's focus on the child, let's treat the child. And what I want to plead for, and this is coming out of my work and your work, is let's work with the parents. Let's see what's going on with the parents. And amazingly, so many of the child's problems will start dissipating or disappearing if you can work out exactly that kind of scenario where the father comes home and he's tense and he's angry and he's seen terrible things and doesn't want to talk about it, and the spouse or the partner's walking around on eggshells. If you can work with the two of them, then the whole atmosphere in the home starts clearing up, I would think. And I'm wondering if you've seen that.
Well, I'm thinking of a specific firefighter I work with and I know, and he will talk about a lot of some of the heavier trauma and guilt that he carries, and starting to really now through learning different mind-body skills like yoga and meditation, and starting to really become aware of how much stress his body is actually holding, realizing how that guilt and that stress had been affecting his parenting, and now with that awareness, making those adjustments, his relationship with his daughter has changed tremendously, where he feels like now I'm able to actually be present with her, have a closer relationship with her, instead of just operating from my own emotionality. So yes, that is a lovely side effect of this work.
Question that just came into my mind is, fire departments are changing. More and more women are becoming firefighters. How is that making a difference? That's the question. How is it making a difference? What's happening?
Well, at least in Minnesota, there are not a lot of women firefighters. They are by far outnumbered. And what I know about what happens within the fire services, they face a lot of additional stressors on top. They're in this male-dominated paramilitary culture, and it's quite challenging for female firefighters.
Yeah, when I've worked with female firefighters, one of the things that has been sort of valuable to them about our work is finding their voice, mm-hmm. being able to really. They're strong to begin with, but as you say, the culture tends to suppress them, and finding their voice and feeling more comfortable in themselves makes it easier to challenge things in a way that's productive. I don't know if that's begun to happen in some of the work that you've seen, but it feels like something really important potentially.
That feels very important. Yes, yeah. Especially the female leaders within the fire service who are doing amazing work. Yeah.
Okay, there are a few more questions that relate to more generally to what's been happening with COVID-19, and I'm curious about your response to them. How can I better manage external stressors and preserve my immunity in a balanced way during COVID-19 times? I often find myself going between being super healthy, exercising regularly, and completely being lazy, Netflix mode. You have any thoughts? I'm sure you see that as well. You have any thoughts about that?
I think the thing that comes to mind when I hear that question, because we are all going through that, is having compassion and care for ourselves, and that's okay. It's okay to sometimes have Netflix mode, but to consistently, as best you're able, to have those small little moments of self-care, whether it's, a walk with the dog or some moments of breathing, doing something every day, which is lovely. And sometimes that self-care looks like Netflix, and that's okay, right? So, and just know that it's normal. We're not perfect, right?
And are you getting that, able to get that message across to firefighters and their families as well?
Yeah, I get that message across as much as possible. People are very hard on themselves. That's something I'm seeing so much, especially now with firefighters and others as well. Just, I should be doing better. I shouldn't feel this way. I should XYZ. I know I need to be working out more. Why aren't I working out? Those types of things. So always trying to invite people to have compassion for themselves and to not be so hard on themselves. Firefighters are just like all of us. We're all human dealing with stress.
I think this is a crucially important point. We're teaching all these self-care skills, and we're encouraging people to use, whether it's guided imagery or yoga or shaking and dancing or soft belly breathing. And perhaps, as you highlighted it, even more deeply important is just self-acceptance and compassion. And my experience is, if I accept those moments of doing nothing, and I'm definitely watching not only Netflix, but Amazon Prime and all of this, if I just accept that, then the time comes and, okay, now it's time to get up and move, and I know what I need to do for myself. So having that balance is even more important now. And I think this time of sort of national stress and trauma is also potentially a time of learning deeper self-acceptance and compassion. And you mentioned early on that your focus in your thesis was on post-traumatic growth. And I wonder if you can say a little bit about that, what you're seeing with firefighters, what you're seeing in yourself and other people you work with in terms of the growth that is coming during this time. That relates to the next question about hope.
Yeah, post-traumatic growth only occurs through suffering. So it is in times of suffering and stress that we are centered in what is important to us, right? I hear that all the time from firefighters and civilians alike now, about, I realize I've got to pay attention to my relationships, or I realize I love my garden, or I realize I have to realign my priorities. We saw that very much so after the events of 9/11. That occurred almost on a national basis, where people started, for instance, changing careers, joining the military, shifting gears in some way to do things that they actually care deeply, that were valued to them. That's what post-traumatic growth is. And so it only is born out of intense distress. So yes, we're seeing it. Trauma can be an opportunity to grow and develop and have more compassion and to focus on the things that are important to you. And many of the firefighters I work with talk about that. Many who have begun to learn the skills of how to ground themselves, how to care for themselves, whether it's through meditation or movement, they have begun through that process to focus on living a more valued life that they deeply care for. And so that's been a nice thing to see as well.
That's beautiful. And I want to encourage, again, everybody who's watching and listening to us to pay attention to those stirrings that are starting to move you and come to the surface about maybe I should do this, and maybe I need to reach out more to other people or be of service or greater service in some way. Really pay attention to those. Those are the fruits of this time of trauma. That is what post-traumatic growth and it's not something mysterious and sort of off in the wilderness or simply in the pages of psychology journals. This is the deepest knowing of all the world's traditional cultures, that out of the suffering, out of this time of trauma, that there can come this kind of growth and compassion and understanding. I just want to respond to one more question, and then I think we'll come to a close. It says, besides turning into your weekly webinars, what are some other ways that I can get more involved with the work at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine? And what I want to encourage all of you who are interested to do is to take a look at our website, see what's of interest to you. We have ongoing online mind-body skills groups where you can learn the skills and techniques that I've been talking about these last few months, that Margaret is teaching to firefighters and their families. You can participate in these groups, 8-week-long groups online, led by our faculty like Margaret, and some of those whom we've certified, who are really skilled in our work as well. And we have a total sliding scale. So if you can pay, we ask you to pay. And if you can't pay, you're welcome. Everyone is welcome in these groups. So if you don't have money, that's fine. You're welcome. So please, that will give you the kind of experience that we've been talking about that Margaret is bringing to firefighters in Minnesota. We also have training programs, and we have one coming up beginning September 30th. Again, look on our website. And so for those of you who either are in the helping professions, your clinicians, your teachers, your community organizers, or for those of you who are clergy, those of you who want to reach out to others, perhaps those who are experiencing this kind of post-traumatic growth and wanting to live in a more meaningful way and wanting to serve others, we welcome you in our training programs. And they're online, so it's easier to be a part of the training programs. Look on our website. Well over 6,000 people have come through the first 5-day phase of this training, and you can look and see the work that we're doing, not only all over the United States, but as Margaret and I sort of got together working in Kosovo, working in Israel and Gaza, and we're expanding. We're expanding in Africa, we're expanding in Asia, in Europe, and in the Caribbean now. And we're looking for people who want to be part of this work. So please, if that is calling to you, look at our website and take a look at what we're offering. And if you want a primer for understanding these techniques and understanding how this work unfolds at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, please buy a copy of my book, The Transformation: Discovering Wholeness and Healing After Trauma. So we're going to come to a close here. I want to thank you, Margaret. It's great. It's great to hear what you're doing. I love that energy that you always have, and that's grown. That's one of the feedback I want to give to you, just to say to you, it's so beautiful to see you reaching out and to see you embracing this work with firefighters and their families. And my hope is that, we'll continue to work together in Minnesota, and this will be a basis for work with firefighters all over the country, what you're doing and what we're working with you on in Minnesota. Next week, we're going to have on the program Thaddeus Gamery and Renee Peterson. Thaddeus is a member of our Center for Mind-Body Medicine faculty, former NYPD, New York. We were at FDNY, New York Fire Department. That's where we started this session. Next week, Thaddeus is a former lieutenant in the New York City Police Department, and he's a member of our Center for Mind-Body Medicine faculty. And Renee Peterson is a captain in the Sheriff's Department in Broward County, Florida. So we'll be discussing bringing this work to police and also working with some of the tensions and the conflicts and the controversy that surrounds policing in this country now and police community relations. So please join us next week. And Margaret, it's great. Thank you again. I'm looking forward to us being together for many, many more years.
Me too, Jim.
And seeing everything that you do and just being a part of it. You're so generous with this work, with the way you do the work, as well as so skilled. So let's take a couple minutes just to breathe together, and then we'll close this session. Just relaxing once again, breathing slowly and deeply. In through the nose, out through the mouth, with our belly soft and relaxed. Relaxing with each exhalation. Opening your eyes, letting your attention come back in the room. Thank you again, everyone, for being with us. And Margaret, see you soon.
See you soon.